For the Lucas Oil Ocean Cup, Todd Swafford had the pleasure over the weekend of visiting with Errol and Barbara Lanier at their home in Sebring. Errol, a longtime throttle man, one of the great ones from the 80s and 90s. He shared the cockpit with Bob Kaiser in the Systems boat, won a world championship. And he shared the cockpit with Rocky2Cuba and Benihana in the late 70s. Barbara, his wife, was a longtime family representative for many different racing organizations. It was great catching up with them. So in Thursday's record attempt, Key West to Cuba and back, Nigel Hook and Jay Johnson in their 48-foot Silverhook, the Lucas Oil team. We thought we'd catch up with Errol because in 1979 he teamed up with Rocky2Cuba to try that record themselves. And here's the story behind that attempt in May of 1979. Now, when you were with Rocky, that was in the late 70s. You ran with him in the Key West to Cuba run. And up until that time, Rocky had been running a Bertram and had been running V-bottoms. And then he got, I think one of the most interesting stories is the development of the catamarans. And James Beard and Clive Curtis were building catamarans, lightweight wooden catamarans over at Cougar in Britain. There was one called Yellow Drama everybody was talking about, and you told Rocky that'd be a boat to buy.
Yeah, when I read some articles about it and everything, and got to looking at some tapes and stuff, I told Rocky this is the one we need to buy us a cat, and I know where there's one, so he says go get it, and that's what we did.
Up until that time, the sport had been dominated by V-bottoms.
Yes.
And it still took a few years for the cats to take over. What was the big difference between the Yellow Drama and then the cats that you started racing in the early 80s and into the later 80s?
Well, the design was the same. It just they started trying to make them lighter and stronger because the speed started coming up. Like the Yellow Drama, we were running maybe 98 miles an hour. In fact, I broke 100 at Lake X for the first time in Rocky's boat. And it just started advancing from there. But everybody was saying, oh, the cats won't run in the rough water, they won't do this and won't do that, and they've never been in one. I'm the only one that was been in one for the racing when he bought the Yellow Drama. And after I rode in it a couple of times, I knew that the catamaran is going to be the way to go because over 100 miles an hour and it's safe and it doesn't do the spin outs and the chine walking and the stuff that the V-bottoms do. Because I got getting tired of getting thrown out of V-bottoms. So once we got the cats, we didn't have to worry about doing that anymore.
So the early cats were more prone to breaking maybe because they were just a little too light, made out of wood. And then when they started making them out of aluminum and then later out of carbon fiber, that's when the speeds really started kicking in on them.
Well, it's not only the speeds of the boat itself, it was the horsepower. They started doing a lot more with the horsepower and it's all weight and speed. So when you start taking a lighter boat and more horsepower, it's going to go faster. And then the drive started advancing. We went to the surface drive with Ornstein, and it started going up from there because as long as you don't have the drag with the outdrives, you're going to go a lot faster.
Now let's talk about Rocky2Cuba, a real showman, one of the most recognized figures in powerboat racing. To talk about who Rocky was and your relationship with him.
Yeah, Rocky was quite a fella. He had a lot of charisma about him. All he wanted to do was compete and win. And those were the things he always wanted to win at anything that he does. And when you look at his background and stuff, that's what he does. He was a wrestler that come over during the Olympics, and he liked America, and he finally ended up moving here, and he started his restaurants and stuff in New York, and he just kept going more and more, bigger and bigger.
Now, he decided that he wanted to do a series of long-distance runs, and he started with an interesting one, Key West to Cuba and back, because there was an embargo with Cuba, not real easy to make relations between the U.S. and Cuba, but Rocky finds a way to do it because he's a Japanese national. He goes through the Czech embassy and makes all these arrangements. And what was your first thought when Rocky came to you and said, I want to do Key West to Cuba?
He just wanted to set the speed record because nobody's done it. And, anything like that, if he wants to do it, I'm on game for it to try to do it. So I said, I'll take care of the boat. And we had to go over to Cuba a couple times to get all the legal stuff done. And once we got the clearance to go, then we just took our race boat, and that's what we used.
Now, you guys had a 3-day window to do this. It was APBA UIM certified. And the day you end up going, it's really rough. But the day before, which was the day you were supposed to go, it was nice. Why couldn't you go that day?
Well, the Cuban government called us, and they had some kind of military thing going on around Veradero, and that's where we were going to go in because their military base was right there close by Veradero, and they told us we couldn't come the first day. So that scrubbed that one, and it was flight. Really no wind, no nothing, and we would have been able to go over because our original plan was to race over, have the little ceremony, and while he's doing the ceremonies and stuff, I'd fueling up, and we're coming back. That way we'd have 3 really world records, would be over and back and over and back. So we were going to have 3 records. That was the plan before the weather come in.
The day you end up having to race, it's pretty choppy. The actual starting point is right at San Key, where you go through the gates and you're heading for Veradero. What kind of sea conditions were you looking at initially?
Initially, it was like 4 to 6, and then it got to 8 to 10, and then about midway, it was 8 to 10 and an occasional surprise. But then it started getting a little bit better on the further we went over.
First couple of things that happen, you get your engine hatches blown off one at a time, so you're running without engine hatches. What kind of problems did that cause for you?
Didn't cause us any problem. As long as we could stay on top of the water, we were fine. As long as we didn't stuff it, no water gets in the engine then.
Now, next thing that happens is you come off a wave and you kind of spear a 10-footer. You get a bunch of water over the bow, and it smacks Rocky in the face. And it messed up his face mask pretty good.
Yeah, there was a bell mask and everything, the little bubble, and it mashed that thing in. I can imagine what he was looking at going across because it had to be distorted. But it caved it in for him, but he just didn't duck quick enough.
Is it that time that you discovered there was a problem with the boat?
Well, I could see it started, and it started cracking and stuff. But if the weather would have been cooperating, we wouldn't have had a problem. We could have went over and come back. But after you break the boat like that, and it is supposed to be getting worse, so we decided not to come back. So I stayed there 3 days before the front went through, and then I brought it back the 3rd day.
Now describe the crack in the wing that you saw. You said you actually started seeing it, and as you were making impact on waves, it would open up and close. Describe what happened to it.
I just kept it going because I asked Rocky a couple times. I said, this thing might be coming apart, and he says, I don't care, we're going to Cuba. So I kept it going as fast as I could. The waves were just getting so big.
Was there any concern that it would break apart on you?
No, just if it broke apart, it broke apart. I can't worry about that. I just told him it's breaking, so expect anything. So I just kept on going.
Now you get over there to the shore and you assess the situation, but you didn't feel that it would, based on the conditions you were looking at, and they were getting worse, that it'd be smart to try and come back.
No, I didn't want to get hurt, so I didn't want to hurt Rocky either. So we probably wouldn't have made it back. They'd had to pick us up with the helicopters.
Errol Lanier, Great story about the 79 attempt by the Benihana team led by Rocky2Cuba1979 for a Key West to Cuba, which they established at 55.1. They did make it over in some very rough seas in that 37-foot catamaran, but were unable to make the run back. Nigel Hook and Jay Johnson will attempt to do it this Thursday. We'll have complete coverage right here with analytics coming direct from the 48-foot Silverhook out in the Florida Straits at lucasoiloceancup.com.